Hello, everybody. Welcome to Module 3. I'm excited to get the ball rolling on the next set of pieces of material that we have for our course. As we learned in Module 2, the Strategic Sport Communication Model, or the SSCM, is built on a number of different theories and models of communication and information that has been proposed across various disciplines over the years. So I trust that you watched the video, you read the articles, and you have a general understanding of the strategic sport communication model at this point. We're going to take a deeper look specifically during this module at personal communication and organizational communication and how it fits within the strategic sport communication model. This piece of material is a little bit meaty. It's tough to get through, but I promise once we get through this set of material, it's going to get a lot more exciting from here. This is really just a foundation for how all organization or how all communication is organized within the realm of the sport communication world. So that's why I really want you to have a great understanding and foundation of this before we move on to the more fun and exciting topics. So the theories used, in the field of communication are brought out through systemic generalizations and plausible explanations of phenomena. So there are a few different ways that we're going to look at how that is explained through sport during this particular module. So the first thing we're going to look at are the genres of communication. And a genre is a socially agreed upon and recognized form of communication that a group of people have developed over time to communicate more effectively and more efficiently with one another. So the newspaper, the radio, the internet, social media, those are genres of communication. Second, we're going to look at the context of communication. So context refers to the setting in which communication takes place. So a context can help establish meaning and can influence what is said and how it is said. There are at least 4 different aspects regarding this idea. There is physical, there's cultural, there's social physiological, and there's temporal. And we're going to have a brief overview of each of those 4 different aspects during this module. And in sport communication, you can also take a look at communication through a sport, in a sport setting, and then in sport in general. So in sport would be teammates supporting each other with words of encouragement. In a sports setting could be apparel executives exchanging ideas or brainstorming sessions for what their next line of sport apparel might be. So that's in a sports setting. And then through sport might be in-game entertainment during breaks of a game or during halftime of a game. So that's through sport. The third and final aspect that we're going to take a look at is sport communication as a dynamic process. And the process is vibrant, it's interactive, it's multidimensional, and there's a lot of different ways that you can take a look at the dynamic process of sport, and there's a few examples that I've outlined. The next thing we're going to look at is the transmission of shared symbols, and sharing symbols is the transmission of messages in and through sport. So these messages can be posts on social media, they can be tweets, they can be sport columns, signs, sport programs, text or copy on a website. They can be images, sound, advertisements, or any other shared symbol that is communicated. And in the sport industry, the sharing of symbols consists of the way in which communicators use language to create symbolism in and through sport. So language is used. The language used to share the symbol may create or reinforce a certain belief and values held by sport participants, sport entities, external stakeholders, or various publics that are involved. So the symbolism created by the sender conveying a message that is influenced by both the content and by its contacts, as the receiver assigns multiple sometimes to who it is sending a message out to. Then we're going to take a look at the meaning created through interaction. So for sport communication, to create meanings, there must be an action and an interaction between communicators and recipients. And one central element of this relationship, as I just mentioned, is language, which involves a system of verbalization and gestures used in the community to facilitate communication. So I use a lot of hand gestures. You've obviously realized that through my videos. And if we were in the classroom this semester, that is probably something that you would recognize while I lecture in front of the class. But that's how I create meaning through our interaction, by using my body language or my gestures while I'm communicating. It's a little bit tough. Maybe you might think it's distracting via video, but that's how I create meaning. And the same thing is true across all forms of communication. There are ways to either verbalize or use gestures to communicate and emphasize certain things and therefore create meaning through that interaction. We will talk about personal communication. So there were two forms of communication through the strategic sport communication model that were really emphasized, and that was personal communication and organizational communication. If we focus first on personal communication, fundamentally, communication can be reduced to three different types of forms in the context of sport. There is interpersonal, there's intrapersonal, and there's small groups of communication. So what's the difference? Effective organizational communication, effective personal communication, first we'll look at intrapersonal and then interpersonal. So those are the first two forms. And intra will be personally what you think of and the thought process in your mind. Interpersonal is when you have a conversation with somebody else. And then small groups is when it goes beyond yourself and one other person and you have up to 3 or more people. So that would be the types of personal communication. Then we move on to organizational communication. And there are 2 key types. And this type is a prerequisite for success, regardless of whether you are a local youth soccer team or you're a highly visible professional sports team. There's intra-organizational, so between an organization and its internal units, and then inter-organizational, so that is between an organization and an external unit. So I touched on this briefly during the last module, and we're going to take a little bit of a deeper look during this module. Then we'll take a look at an organizational structure. And an organizational structure defines the significant departments or units in a business. So how activities such as tasks are allocated, the coordination and supervision of certain people is directed, and overall, how does an organization have its workflow laid out? So what is the map of the organization? Who's in charge of who reports to who? That's an organizational structure. And from that structure, you're going to have a chain of command. And your chain of command is how tasks are delegated and work is approved or work is accomplished, or groups of people within an organization work together to achieve goals, objectives, and certain tasks. From there, you'll look at the span of control. And the span of control represents 2 things: who falls under a manager or management team. And really, that will determine whether or not an organization is centralized or decentralized. So if you have a centralized organization, you're going to have a chain of command, a span of control that is easy to follow, and it goes all the way up to a leadership position that is ultimately making decisions, final decisions. If you have a decentralized chain of command, there are several different people that have the ability to make decisions. So it's kind of like the example that I think of the most is mom says no, but dad says yes. That's decentralized communication. Somebody has to have the final say. So that would be decentralized if everything is even. Maybe in your household, or an example of a household, you know, one parent or another has final say in a decision. That's centralized communication. But more likely than not, if your family was like mine, mom and dad, there was no person who actually had final control. So if I went to mom and she said no, I could probably go to dad and he would say yes. There was a decentralized form or chain of command when it came to things, at least in my household. And that is true sometimes, or that same example can be applied to the workplace. Fortunately, more commonly, there is a centralized form of command. So there is one person that has the final say in an organization. sometimes those organizational structures are difficult to understand. So the way that we have, through the strategic sport communication model, made it easier for people to understand is we've created an organizational chart. And an organizational chart really is just a diagram that visually conveys the company's internal structure, detailing the roles, the responsibilities, the relationships between individuals. Organizational charts either broadly depict an organization, or they can really drill down to the specific departments. So it is a visual display of what the organizational structure is. So that leads us into our last section of this module, which is visual communication. A picture is worth 1,000 words, right? We can say that about so many things. Now, in the world of social media, pics or it didn't happen, right? That is the phrase. If you don't take a picture, if you don't post it, how do I have proof that it even happened? Okay, that might be a little bit of an extreme example, but usually pictures are an easy, seamless, streamlined way to communicate something. Like the example that I just shared, an organizational structure can be explained in written form, or it can visually be displayed in an organizational chart. So we're going to take a look at some examples. Visual communication can be anything from a chart, a graph, a GIF, a photograph, or an advertisement. There are a lot of different ways that visual communication presents itself within the world of sports. One of those examples is an infographic, and we're going to take a look at infographics specifically. But before we get there, we'll talk about the benefits of visual communication. We'll have a brief history. We'll talk about visual storytelling, how color is one of the key factors in visual communication, along with some of the other contributing factors, but color is one of the key forms. If you've taken the marketing class that I teach, you'll know that I am a big proponent of using color to help convey messages. And that is the same thing through storytelling. There is an excellent video that you guys have throughout this module discussing specifically the emotions that color can evoke. Now, the video talks more specifically about logo design, but really it is applicable to visual design in general. And the first color it starts with is the color yellow, which happens to be my favorite color. And it is actually one of the 2021 Pantone colors of the year. The actual color, the term that they call it, is illuminating. But without trying to be fancy, it's the color yellow. And the video will tell you the colors or the emotions that yellow can make you feel. And it goes through the entire rainbow about all the different colors. So visual communication, the visual benefit of storytelling, and how color and all the other key components play a factor in visual communication. Then the last thing we'll do is, like I said, talk about infographics. And infographics are an example of visual communication. So rather than writing a story like the written forms of communication that we studied last module, whether it be a column, an article, a straight lead story, a game story, a pre-game story, a preseason story, a postseason story, all the different forms that we studied, you can create an infographic. It's a fun visual way to explain information or outline it. And there are some specific ways and guidelines to do that so that it is effective and it has the same impact that a written form has. It's just a little bit more fun and exciting. So at the end of analyzing visual communication and studying specifically infographics, you are going to get the chance to create one. The great thing is you don't have to have a background in design in order to create one. I have a bunch of different free resources that you are going to get to play around with. Have fun with this. We're going to use the topic of the Super Bowl. Why? Because the Super Bowl is one of the most watched sporting events in the world. It's happening throughout the course of this module, and there is so much material regarding the Super Bowl that I feel like somebody can find something related to the Super Bowl that interests you. If you don't like football, maybe you like the ads, maybe you like the food, maybe you don't like the Super Bowl at all, but there's lots of statistics on all the things you can do other than watch the Super Bowl. So your job is going to be collecting data, organizing data, and arranging it in a visual communication form through an infographic. So we are going to do that at the end of this module as your assignment. There is also a quiz that will just recap the first 5 weeks of our story or of our class. Nothing to be intimidated by. You will have the chance to go back and reference any of our material. So don't feel like this is meant to intimidate you or scare you. These should be things that you should have already learned throughout the course of this module or the last 2 modules. So this is a great recap and refresher of everything that we have learned. So that will bring us to the end of our module. If you have any questions about anything, please reach out to me. There are a few of you that have, and I've loved engaging with you. So if there's anything that you need, reach out. Other than that, I am here to help you be successful. So I look forward to seeing your infographics at the end of this module. Good luck, everybody.